The victims are identified as 25-year-old Keyana Weathersby, her 2-year-old son, Camari Givens, and 30-year-old Erica Weathersby, Keyana's sister and the child's aunt. Jackson police say the three were found shot multiple times inside a home on Queen Alexandria Lane just after 9:15 Saturday night.
There is a street in Jackson, Mississippi, where the houses sit close together and the yards are small and neat, and where on most nights the loudest sound is a dog barking 2 doors down. Queen Alexandria Lane is not the kind of street that makes the news. It is the kind of street where people wave from their porches and know which car belongs to which house. On the night of June 27, 2026, that ordinary, unremarkable street became the scene of one of the most disturbing crimes Jackson had seen in years. By the time it was over, a mother, her sister, and a 2-year-old boy would be dead inside their own home. And it would take police almost 3 weeks, 2 states, 4 arrests, and one deeply unsettling discovery about where the murder weapon actually came from, to even begin to answer why. Stay with this one until the end, because the deeper this case goes, the more disturbing it gets. And if you want more cases like this one, covered carefully and completely, make sure you're subscribed, because there is more coming. Let's start with who they were, because before they were victims, before they were names read out at a press conference, they were just a family trying to get through a Saturday night like anyone else. Keyana Weathersby was 25 years old. She was a mother, not in the abstract sense, but in the very specific, very demanding, very ordinary sense of someone who spends her days managing a toddler's naps and meals and moods. She lived in Jackson, a city that has never made things easy for the people who love it. Jackson has spent decades fighting to hold on to itself. Its water system has failed publicly and repeatedly. Its population has shrunk. Its violent crime rate regularly puts it near the top of national lists no city wants to be on. Raising a small child there, showing up every day, doing the quiet, unglamorous work of motherhood, that is its own kind of resilience. That was Keyana's life. Her son was named Camari Givens. He was 2 years old. At 2, a child's entire universe is a handful of faces and a handful of rooms. Camari's universe was his mother, her voice, her smell, the shape of her arms. That night, he had been fed, bathed, and put to bed the way he was every night. He was asleep in his room, in his own bed, doing the one thing a 2-year-old is supposed to be able to do safely inside his own house. And then there was Erica Weathersby, Keyana's older sister, 30 years old, 5 years ahead of Keyana in age, and by every account from the family since, the one Keyana leaned on. The older sister who had seen a little more of life, who showed up not because anything was wrong, but because that's simply what sisters do. She was there that night the way she was probably there most nights, helping, present, part of the household in every way that mattered, even if she didn't technically live there. 3 people, a mother, her sister, a toddler, an ordinary Saturday night, the television probably on somewhere in the house, dinner dishes maybe still in the sink. And at around 9:15 p.m., someone came into that home, and by the time it was over, all 3 of them were dead. When Jackson police officers arrived at the house in the 300 block of Queen Alexandria Lane, they weren't walking into a robbery gone wrong in the way most people picture one. There was no chaos, no wild spray of gunfire, no sign that things had simply spiraled out of control. What they found instead was quiet and methodical and almost impossible to process. 2 women shot multiple times, and in a back bedroom, a 2-year-old boy shot in the bed where his mother had tucked him in. Investigators would later confirm something that made the entire case even harder to sit with. Camari had not wandered into a dangerous moment. He had not been caught in a crossfire between 2 rooms. He was in his bed, asleep when he was shot. Whoever pulled that trigger walked to where he was sleeping. Jackson's police chief, Dr. Rashal Brackney, stood in front of cameras not long after the discovery and did not try to make it sound smaller than it was. She called the killings horrifying and vile. She specifically pointed to the murder of the toddler, describing him as completely defenseless, and said that whoever did this had to be one of the most vile human beings imaginable. that it takes a coward to kill a child that small. That word, coward, is not typical police language. It's not measured, it's not procedural. It sounded like grief. And across Jackson, people felt it the same way. In the earliest hours of the investigation, detectives noticed something missing from the scene. The family's car, a red 2020 Mitsubishi Mirage, was gone. Someone had taken it either during or immediately after the shooting. Think about what that detail tells you. Whoever did this had just shot 3 people, including a sleeping child, and they were composed enough afterward to think about their exit. That is not the behavior of someone who panicked and lost control. That is the behavior of someone who walked in with an intention and walked out with a plan. The car turned up the next day, sitting empty in a public park in North Jackson called Manhattan Park. No one inside it, just abandoned there, like it had done its job and was no longer needed. And for the better part of 24 hours after that, whoever had done this was still out there, walking around Jackson, while 3 families were being told the worst news they would ever receive. Word got out fast, not just through news coverage, but through the neighborhood itself. A memorial started forming outside the house almost immediately. Flowers, candles, stuffed animals, left by people who in many cases had never met the family. A Jackson resident named Candace Crump put the memorial together herself. She told a reporter that she didn't personally know the Weathersby sisters, but that when 3 lives are lost like that and one of them is a baby, humanity demands some kind of response. The family's grief was something else entirely. Keyana and Erica's older brother, DeMarco Bailey, lives in Texas. He had lost his own wife 2 years earlier and was already raising 2 kids on his own when he got the call about his sisters and his nephew. He described his sisters as easygoing, close, best friends who were essentially raising Camari together. He pushed back hard against any idea that his sisters had been living some kind of chaotic or dangerous lifestyle. His sister, he said, wasn't out at clubs causing trouble. She was working. She was staying home with her son. That was her life. And now he was left with a 2-year-old nephew who would never get the chance to grow up, and a demand that stayed with him through every interview afterward. He needed justice, not only for his sisters, but for a baby who never had the chance to understand what was happening to him. Behind the scenes, while the family grieved, the investigation moved fast. Detectives worked the scene for shell casings, trajectories, and biological material, all of it sent for forensic analysis. The medical examiner's findings lined up with what the scene had already suggested. Multiple gunshot wounds, multiple victims, and a level of precision that ruled out anything accidental. Vehicle forensics ran alongside it. Fingerprints, DNA, fibers, the kind of trace evidence people in a hurry rarely think to wipe clean. At the same time, tips started pouring in from the community. Whatever else might be said about Jackson, it is a city full of people who knew Keyana, who knew Erica, who had crossed paths with Camari at some point, and those people were not willing to let this go unanswered. By June 29th, less than 48 hours after the shooting, those tips, combined with forensic leads, gave detectives something solid enough to act on. They identified a vehicle they believed was connected to the murders and attempted to pull it over at the intersection of 18th Street and Maddox Road. The driver refused to stop. Officers were able to box the vehicle in and safely take 2 men into custody without further incident. Inside that stopped car, sitting on the back seat, police recovered 3 firearms, a 9mm pistol, an assault-style rifle, and a second, unidentified, gold-colored handgun. All 3 were sent off for ballistic testing. The 2 men taken into custody were 28-year-old Cornelius Carter and 28-year-old Jordan Carter. No relation, despite sharing a last name. Both were charged with capital murder. Cornelius Carter faced an additional charge of being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm, pointing to a criminal history that predated this case. At their initial court appearance, a judge denied both men bond, citing prior convictions for aggravated assault, including, in one case, assault on a police officer, and ruling that both men presented a known danger to the community. For a moment, it looked like the case might be closing in, but investigators were careful even then not to suggest the work was finished. 3 days later, on June 30th, police announced a third arrest, 25-year-old Makala Young was taken into custody and charged with capital murder as well, not as someone who fired a weapon, but under the legal theory that she participated in the crime itself. According to investigators, Young drove Cornelius Carter and Jordan Carter to the home on Queen Alexandria Lane that night. Detectives said she knew going in that the plan was a robbery. When she heard gunfire coming from inside the house, she drove away and left the two men behind. That role, prosecutors argued, was enough to support the same capital murder charge faced by the men she drove there. Young made her initial court appearance on July 1st and, like Carter and Carter before her, was denied bond. That detail, that Young allegedly knew the plan going in was a robbery, is the closest anyone in law enforcement has come to publicly describing a motive. Investigators have consistently declined to say much more than that, insisting the shooting was targeted, not random, and that all three victims were known to at least some of the people involved. But if a robbery is really at the center of this, it makes what happened even harder to reconcile. Somewhere between walking into that house looking for something to take and walking out having killed a sleeping 2-year-old, something happened that turned a robbery into a massacre. What that something was is still not something investigators have said publicly. Then on July 2nd, at a news conference that was supposed to be an update, Chief Brackney delivered two pieces of news that changed the shape of the entire case. The first was a fourth arrest. A man named Devone Edward Moticure had been taken into custody, not in Mississippi, but nearly 400 miles away in Forney, Texas, a small city outside Dallas. He'd been arrested by the U.S. Marshal Service, working alongside the Texas Department of Public Safety at a home in the 1400 block of Kirkhill Lane. According to the Kaufman County Sheriff's Office, Moticure was taken into custody on July 1st and booked into the Kaufman County Jail on a capital murder charge, while Mississippi authorities arranged to bring him back. The second piece of news was the one that made people sit up. Chief Brackney announced that a preliminary investigation, run through the Mississippi Crime Lab, indicated that one of the weapons connected to the shooting was a rifle that had been stolen from a marked Jackson Police Department vehicle. A police department's own rifle, taken from one of its own patrol cars, allegedly used to help kill a mother, her sister, and her 2-year-old son. Officials were careful to say the full forensic analysis hadn't been completed at that point, but the early findings were enough to raise a question nobody wanted to be sitting with. How does a weapon meant to protect a city end up inside the home, where 3 of that city's residents were murdered? It took 2 weeks for Moticure to actually be extradited back to Mississippi. On July 16th, he made his initial court appearance in Jackson. The charges against him were more extensive than what any of the first 3 suspects were facing. Moticure was charged with 3 separate counts of capital murder, 1 for each victim, along with auto theft, being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm, aggravated assault, and burglary of an occupied dwelling. Like the 3 arrested before him, he was denied bond. 4 people, 2 men who allegedly went inside the house, a woman who allegedly knew the plan and drove them there, and a 4th man arrested weeks later and hundreds of miles away, facing the most extensive set of charges of anyone in the case so far. Tied in some way, investigators have not fully detailed to a rifle that should never have left a police car in the first place. While all of that was unfolding in courtrooms and press conferences, the family was doing what families do after a tragedy like this, trying to bury their dead. A funeral was eventually held for Keyana, Erica, and Camari. One family member, standing outside the service, put it simply: "Everyone is hurt by this. Not just the immediate family, but the extended relatives, the friends, the neighbors who'd never met them, but left flowers on their lawn anyway." DeMarco Bailey had already set up a fundraiser to help cover the cost of burying 3 family members at once, an expense no one should ever have to plan for, let alone all in the same week. In the days after the first 2 arrests, Jackson's Mayor John Horn addressed the city directly, describing a troubling rise in gun violence and senseless killing that had left the community reeling. He said no family should ever have to face what the Weathersby family was facing, and he pushed back against any idea that this kind of violence should be treated as normal. His message to anyone carrying anger, anyone considering picking up a gun to settle a conflict was blunt. Stop. Choose something else. Because one decision can cost a life and cost your own future right along with it. Jackson police, for their part, announced a rapid response initiative, extra officers, a visible presence in the neighborhoods hit hardest by gun violence, running around the clock for weeks at a time. Chief Brackney acknowledged budget pressures existed within the department, but said plainly that this was not the moment to let money be the deciding factor in whether the city got safer. What makes this case so hard to sit with isn't just the number of victims, or even the fact that one of them was a child. It's the layers that kept surfacing. First, the discovery that the child had been specifically shot in his bed, not caught in any crossfire. Then the growing list of people allegedly involved, not one shooter acting alone, but at least 4 people, spread out enough that one of them had to be tracked down and extradited from another state entirely. And then the detail that still doesn't sit right with anyone following this closely, that the rifle used in the killing may have been stolen police property. As of the most recent court appearances, all 4 defendants, Cornelius Carter, Jordan Carter, Makala Young, and Devon Modecure, are being held without bond, facing capital murder charges. Under the law, every one of them is presumed innocent unless and until a court finds otherwise. And the investigation, according to Jackson police, remains active. Investigators have not ruled out the possibility that more people were involved. If you have any information related to what happened on Queen Alexandria Lane in Jackson, Mississippi, you're urged to contact the Jackson Police Department at 6019-601-800 or Crime Stoppers at 601-35-5-TIPS. Somewhere in that city, a family is still waiting for the rest of the answer, and so it seems is everyone else who's been following this case. That's where things stand right now. If you want to be here when the next update on this case breaks, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.